this is Atlas's 34th session overall, and we're going to just work in the round pen, work on some leading. So I'm trying to have him follow here, follow that up with my stick to just get him to go forward. He's a lot better at it, but he is still lagging behind a bit, but overall a lot better. So here I'm trying to get him to just follow my hand, and he's not quite sure. He's following good, but I'd like him to be a little bit closer, a little bit more confident. So I'm going to have him target my hand. So I'm going to stop right here and then hold out my hand. He'll touch it. I'll click right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and feed him some grain. And he got a little worried about the whips moving. That's all right. Just move him more and he'll get used to it. But he's not quite yet confident of eating out of my hand. So I have the bowl and then I'll just throw it in there. And we'll move on and go the other way. So same kind of thing here. I'm just kind of showing him like, hey, if you follow my hand, it's just a target. And that really helps him figure out what I want without a lot of pressure. So the worried and more flighty the horse, the less pressure I really want to put on them until they're a lot more confident. So that's why I'm having him target here instead of just continuing to ask for the leading and the forward movement with my whips. So it just really helps speed that up because he's more interested in it because there's food and not being forced to because there's pressure. Because you're just going to end up making them run away anyways. So, and we want the opposite, especially if I'm teaching the leading. This is really nice. He's nice and close here, so I click him for that. That's the closest he's been to me. So obviously each horse is different. Atlas is definitely the furthest to the side of where he's flighty, he's worried, he's scared. So I am going to reward him for coming in and being calm and being relaxed. Now, if I had a different type of horse that's very pushy, very relaxed, very calm, but just kind of wants to get what they want out of the situation, they'll push you around, they're not afraid, that would be different. I would not be rewarding that horse for coming into my space. So everything is different based on the horse. This is much better. See how he's following closer already? That was really good. So I'll click him again there where he stops right next to me. He's really getting the hang of this. So as you can see in the previous videos where we worked on leading with the whips, he did make progress, but it was a bit slower. I feel like this sped it up quite a bit. He really understands the targeting and following of my hand. So for him, that really worked out well. If you had a horse that was a bit pushier, then I might not use the target as much. I would use the whips because they really got to work on moving off of pressure, but Atlas doesn't. He understands that, and I don't want to do too much and make him afraid of it. So I kept asking him there. He was just kind of a little worried, so he was doing some stress grazing, and I'm just going to refocus him, yield his hindquarters, have him lead up to me, which was quite nice. So I'll click him for that because he came forward toward me exactly where I wanted. He was right in the center of my chest, and he wasn't off somewhere. He didn't run off. He didn't get scared, so I'm going to reward him for that. So this is the video where I started adding in the positive reinforcement, where before in the round pen, I didn't. I was just working on the whips, and really with Atlas, I'm just kind of experimenting some things here and finding out what the best method for him is. Definitely, if you want to learn a lot of horsemanship skills, get yourself a Mustang. So this right now, I'm just tossing the lunge whip around his front legs, and then when it touches his front legs, I'm going to click and feed that. So I think there really just definitely needs to be a balance between the positive and the negative reinforcement. I would definitely use more positive if your horse is more fearful, and less if your horse is more confident and getting them to work off of pressure. It really depends on the situation. I like to use a lot more positive reinforcement in situations where you might be more vulnerable. So like lifting the feet and doing your first ride, like getting on their back, really building confidence with those things versus kind of just, you might get stuck in a situation where you might have to put too much pressure on. So I definitely think horses need to move and learn to move off of pressure, but without kind of overdoing it. And that can be hard depending on your horse, but that's what I've gotten out of this training experience. But again, I'm just using the lunge whip on his back legs there, and then I fed him for it, so same kind of thing. And now here I'm just kind of flinging it around. It touches his legs, I'll click, and then I'll reward him. So he's had the whip on him before, as you've seen in the previous videos, but I'm just trying to make a little bit more positive association with it. And really he started out that way. So if you go back even further where he's in his pasture and I first started touching him with the stick, I started out with that, with just having the stick, letting him target it, and then touching him with it. And then we just went to the negative reinforcement, have him move from it, and now I'm kind of mixing it back in again because I really like how it went in the beginning. So I'm just doing the same thing on the opposite side. Touch his front legs with this lunge whip. As the lash goes around his legs, then I'm going to click it and take it off and then feed him. So it's important to have the lash on the horse. So like right there, it's on the horse, and I clicked it while it was on, and then take it off and feed. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, whatever the horse is doing at the time is what you're clicking for. So you don't want to take it off and click because you're not getting the full benefit of it. You want the whip on the horse. Then they think, oh, every time this whip touches me, I get clicked and food comes. That's great. So it's a little bit different than the negative reinforcement. So when you're mixing them, you kind of remember when to take off the pressure, when not to, kind of a thing. Because if I was going to ask, but I'm not asking him to go forward either. So if I'm asking him to do something and move forward, then that pressure goes away. If I'm asking them to move, I'm not asking him to move. So I'm asking him to tolerate. And so I want to reward him tolerating it. So I'm just kind of flicking the lunge line around his legs there. It touches his legs. I'll click him and I'll go ahead and feed him. Then my video cut off. I don't know what happened to the middle part, but this is another part of the same session. So I'm just asking him to yield his shoulders over. He's not quite understanding it, so I'm kind of moving my whips in a different way to kind of help him out here. He's like, not sure. There we go. So he really was not super sure about the situation. You could tell he was kind of in a freeze mode, and then when he did take that step, he really moved a lot, and then he shook his head and kind of reset himself. He's coming down from the sympathetic nervous system. He's like, putting that pressure on him with the whips worried him a bit, and then once the whips went away, he was like, oh, okay, I'm okay, and he's coming back down. So those were calming signals. So I'm just putting him back in position, ask him again, there he goes. And once he stepped over, I clicked and I'm going to give him some food. So when I'm asking for movement, here's didn't quite get it. I'm like, okay, there's food in the bowl. So I'll just give him a minute. But when I'm asking for movement with the positive reinforcement, I will release at the same time as I click because I'm asking for that movement. I'm not asking for tolerance or the desensitizing like I was previously when I had the lunge line on his legs. So I'm just rewarding that movement too. So when I'm asking him to move forward, then I have the click at the same time and the release with the whip at the same time. So that shoulder movement he just did there was really nice. He wasn't super worried. He moved right over. Went really well. So I am going to be working my way up to having him eat out of my hand, but depends on the horse. It can be a process. For both of my Mustangs, it was a process. Some Mustangs, it's not going to be a process. And definitely most domestic horses, it shouldn't be a huge process, but I will show that process in in later videos. So I'm just kind of rub on his face, hang out with him for a minute, and ask him to move over. Good. And as soon as he moved that left front over, I'm going to click him and feed him. I'm just kind of getting in position here so we can ask him to go the other way. So I feel like this is a good introduction into blending the positive and negative reinforcement. So I really liked just adding these together. Okay. So I'm going to ask him for some sideways here. He decides to leave. That's okay. He kind of left and then was like, oh, not sure what to do. He's trying to figure it out. So I'm just going to keep holding. See, he's thinking through this. He's like, oh, not sure. He's got his hip. There we go. He steps over. Then he's going to shake his head and kind of get himself back to being relaxed. He's going to lick his lips. So the black whip in my right hand's blocking his forward, and then the longer lunge whip's going to push him over sideways. And sideways is usually somewhat difficult compared to the shoulder yield and the hindquarter yield thing to teach a horse because it's two different things at once, and they get confused. So I'm just going to have him I'm kind of push one thing at a time. So maybe you his shoulders and then his hindquarters and then ask for the same thing. But I'm trying to ask him with a pre-cue with my legs here, and he wants to kind of bounce around. He's not super sure. That's totally fine. I'm just going to set him up and then ask again. He kind of moved a little bit over in the right direction, so I'll click him for that. So the key would be not getting him so worried that he's not going to try anymore. He's just going to run away and move him into flight. For a more quiet horse, you want the opposite. So it's the same thing, but you just don't want them to get into shutdown mode where they're just like, I'm not trying no more, and they're in the freeze. So here he's kind of in freeze. He's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going anywhere. Nothing's happening. I'm just going to keep tapping and keep asking him to move over. But once he gets a step in the right direction, I'm going to click him and reward him for that. There we go. That was nice. Or at the very least, I always am going to release the pressure. So, but once he get like that right there, he had a really nice sideways step with both hind legs. I'm going to click him and feed him for that. So I want to tell him he's on the right direction. Like this is what I want. So he has something to look forward to versus I'm just going to keep tapping you until you get it. Which you can keep using the negative reinforcement, and as long as you're releasing and then give him a nice little break, he could learn that way too. But I think using the positive reinforcement really helps because he wants to learn a bit more. So see, he's already moving over a lot better, and he's not in that flight mode or that freeze mode a lot. He's trying to figure it out. I think adding in the food helps him solve the puzzle a lot better. So I'm just going to do a bit of desensitizing since I've been asking him to move over. Use my pre-cue. I'm just going to step over and then just use some rhythmic pressure with my lunge line or my lunge whip. There he's taking a step over. There we go. And a release. Not the best of steps, but he did it. There, that was really good. Really good. Yeah. Click him for that. So I'm clicking him as he's going over. So as both legs are like crossing over, that's when I'm clicking him. You can probably hear it in the video if it's not too windy. But I like having the positive reinforcement at different intervals. I'm not clicking every step over. You can, especially when you're shaping a behavior in the beginning, like every behavior in the right step, and every step in the right direction you can click, and then you kind of shape that, and you don't use as much positive reinforcement. But for him, I'm trying to figure out what's the best thing to do. So I'm asking him with the whips, and then when he gets the right direction, I'm gonna reward with the negative reinforcement, which is release of pressure. And then if he does a really good one, then I'm going to click and treat him for it. So it's going to be more of the interval reinforcement. So he always gets reinforced regardless with the negative reinforcement because the pressure always comes off even when he takes a little step. But he gets a much bigger reward if he does the correct crossover steps. So it's more of a casino type thing. Like you're going to continue playing. You don't get a reward every time, but you might get a bigger one later on. So that's what I'm trying to describe in how this training is going right here. So I'm just going to work on some desensitizing here. He's really getting it. It's not too bad. The sideways can be a little tough. So ask him to come up. His leading is much better. His draw is a lot better. So it's nice to see some progress with him. And him just moving off of the whips and steering a little bit, so that we'll use for later on too. He's just moving to the side there, away from that whip, but leading pretty straight, so that's really nice. Very good. And just hang out and give him a treat, and he's going to be done for this session.